Hey, one of the toughest subject matters in life today is forgiveness. I got to tell you, it's a tough one. But really, the first to apologize is the bravest. The first to forgive is the strongest. The first to forget is the happiest. So love and forgiveness cannot be separated. So when someone says, I love you, God, but does not have any forgiveness in his heart for others, he or she's a liar. It's not my opinion or just my words, but the words of Christ. In Matthew 6:14, Christ says, "For if you forgive people their transgressions, their reckless and willful sins, leaving them go and giving up resentment, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their trespasses, that reckless and willful sins, leaving them, letting them go, and giving up resentment, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses." I mean, on the cross, the last few words that Christ spoke was, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do," speaking to his Father. I mean, he was unrecognizable on the cross. I know we've got pictures of Jesus on the cross with a chiseled face and a few wounds, but he was unrecognizable. His chin was probably up here by his cheeks, his forehead down over by his nose. He was unrecognizable. Can you picture a human being forgiving others looking like that, feeling that type of torture and disrespect? So, what is forgiveness? It's defined as to stop feeling angry or resentful towards someone for an offense or a mistake or a disrespect they've showed you. To be able to cancel a debt that has entitled you. I mean, they hurt you. It's entitled to get even, right? To disregard someone's ignorance and impoliteness or anger towards you. To make allowances for someone's stupidity. Forgiveness defined is giving up my right to hurt for hurting me. Usually forgiveness is not granted because someone deserves it, but rather forgiveness is given because it's an action that displays mercy, grace, and love. Look at the actual definition of forgive and forgiveness. And look them up. Read them, reread them, and absorb the truth and wisdom that's in plain sight with this word, forgive, with this other word, forgiveness. They are one and the same. To define a word is to get it ready for action. To define a word is to gather information, see exactly what it means. Words that are not defined are like soldiers in training camp. They're learning how to engage the enemy. Words that are not defined are words that live in the mind and take up space until they're let out to battle. Words that are defined are like soldiers who are now in battle and putting into practice everything they've learned. Words that defined are words that have left the space in mind and are now engaging the demonic warfare with solutions and power to overcome sickness and confusion, anger and resentment, doubt, pain, and emotional stress. Once the defined words, forgiveness, mercy, and grace are set free to engage into battle, peace will be the outcome. Let's define mercy and grace. What are we talking about here? We talk about words, and for me anyhow, I never really knew what they meant. So when I started looking up words, that I started finding the power to change, the power to be someone different than a selfish man. Mercy and grace, at the same time when we're listening to these definitions, let's use our imagination, put it into work, so we can envision exactly what these powerful words demonstrate, and then let's realize the potential of the phrase, a peace that transcends understanding. Mercy defined is kindness in excess of what may be expected or demanded by fairness. The power to forgive and to be kind. A refraining from harming or punishing offenders, enemies, people, in one's power to do so. Having a tendency toward forgiveness and clemency in one whose duty is to punish the offenders. Basically, the power of a judge who judges not. In other words, hey, taking the reality that we have been offended, we have been disrespected, we all have been betrayed, but we're not going to judge that. We're going to move past that. That's what mercy is. Everybody looks for mercy. When you mess up, aren't you looking for some mercy? If you go to court and you sped and you're guilty and the judge says, you know what, I'm going to drop the charges. Well, that's mercy. It's his job to fine you and to judge you, but he decides not to. Grace is a divine influence acting in men and women to make them pure and morally strong. It's a special virtue given to a person, a human being, by God to bring honor and dignity to that person. Why can we be so rebellious towards instruction? Is it because we've all been slowly tortured and badgered with lies and rules, regulations all of our lives? Is it because we've been inundated with religion that brought in shame and guilt? Is it because the cultural traditions that we once held value to are now being exposed as lies? Envision the tenderness and the wisdom in the instruction from the Word of God. His words have no relationship with words like shame, guilt, anger, sorrow, lust, greed, confusion, lack in our lives, broken relationships, broken homes, broken love, and broken promises were never his intention for us, for men or women. Never. It's no wonder we're emotionally lost, or frightened, confused, sometimes guilt-ridden with self-condemnation. We were created to be a relational being, yet born into a world of war. We were all instructed to love one another, yet we all are guilty of lying, betraying, cheating, and dishonoring one another to some degree. But we justify these actions, whether intentionally or unintentionally. We say things like, it's not my fault. They started it. I had a right to get even. I would never do to others what's been done to me, and on and on. We tend to measure if we are admitting faults, the trespass against someone, by saying things like, it was a little lie. It was none of your business. It was not a betrayal. It was the truth. I told the truth. I always give, but never receive. I'm tired of being taken for granted. We scream victimization, yet we have a hard time tolerating people who are always the victims of something. I will say this, if you and I are alive and breathing, we will all hurt one another, and the quicker we realize this, the quicker and easier it will be for us to forgive. This brings to mind the title of this study, Forgive Them, for they know not what they do. If we choose to live out the love of God as the purpose of our life, then forgiving is not an option that can be avoided. Forgiveness is Christianity. Forgiveness is love. Without it, love will not exist in anyone. Jesus Christ is the Word made flesh. He is the part of God that became a human being, witnessing firsthand the darkness and the confusion that engulfed mankind. He realized how helpless and broken all of his people were, and he did three things. He exposed the lies and the liar, Satan. He exposed self-righteousness in those that tried to hold their power over others. He administered and demonstrated and encouraged and brought to the core of humanity unconditional love through compassion and forgiveness. He brought healing. He raised people from the dead, brought wholeness to the mind, restored vision both physically and spiritually, and unconditional love beyond the word that describes unconditional love. His reward, death. He was murdered by crucifixion. He was God, yet he was betrayed, mocked, called a devil, beat, humiliated, and tortured in front of his mother. Unbelievable. His friends and followers ran, except for John and Mary. He was innocent of all crimes and deserved to be loved. He deserved to be worshiped, admired, and respected, but it was for naught. The Creator became the creation. He was allowed to experience everything that we experience. It was through his perfection and purity that the lies of evil were exposed to humanity. Through his perfection, we can now understand and envision evil and darkness and spiritual warfare. But through his forgiveness, we are saved. He allowed his Spirit to absorb all the pain and suffering, confusion, lust, greed, lies, harm, anger, rage, hate, bitterness, and every other negative word that describes Satan. And his minions unleashed onto mankind in the beginning were all of these words, these emotions. He demonstrated the definitions of forgiveness and mercy, favor, grace, and love. This is what he desperately tried to share with us through his word that is alive, energetic, and powerful to change the course of action in each and every one of our lives. The question is, are we willing to become like-minded with him and receive the gifts that he so devoutly and selfishly unselfishly, selflessly, let's say, died for. Mercy, favor, and grace, forgiveness and understanding, patience and love. To receive is to believe. These are the words that he has demonstrated. His instruction is wisdom, not a rule. His instruction is peace, not a regulation. His instruction is loving and kindness, not painful and distorted. His instruction is the only truth to living a life in peace with another in spite of enemies and death. Matthew 18:21 through 23. Then Peter came up to him and said, Lord, how many times may my brother sin against me, and I forgive him, and let it go? Up to 7 times? Christ said, Jesus answered him, I tell you, not up to 7 times, but 77 times 7. Forgiveness does not mean that we accept the behavior that we have forgiven, but to understand how and why our brothers and sisters do the emotionally unstable things they do to one another. Imagine yourselves forgiving as he is instructed, 77 times 7. Phenomenal. We forgive to gain control of our lives from hurt emotions. We forgive so we will not become bitter and sick, confused and angry, entitled, and alleged in our own minds. We forgive so we can stop defining those around us that are innocent and do not deserve negative energy. Forgiveness is the most difficult word in any language to practice and bring to life. How can someone who has been abused, defiled, hurt, disrespected, traumatized, who's lost loved ones, etc., how can we forgive? How can that kind of treatment bring forgiveness? The only reason it comes to my mind, based on how difficult it must be, the only reason we forgive is because God said so. His living here on earth and his experience with evil and betrayal and disrespect and death kind of brings credibility to his testimony. He has made it plain as we read scriptures, but not without the effects of practicing and putting into action his forgiveness, his love, his mercy, as a credible and valuable guide to a healthy, stable life full of peace. I mean, he did this. Can we? Grace, when practiced and put into action, is a divine influence, a special virtue from God given to us to bring honor and dignity to ourselves and to one another. The word given describes a gift. Grace is a gift to those who practice and put into action through obedience. Not because we emotionally feel like it, but because we understand its power. I mean, if we wait till we're emotionally moved to do something like this, it'll never happen. Jesus is forgiveness. Jesus is grace. Jesus is mercy. It is when we activate and practice grace that we receive the gift of divine influence. It is in that moment that we receive the power, that special virtue. Therefore, without the obedience to surrender, we will never have the power to be who he created us to be. We will continue to suffer more than we flourish. Foolishly, we will continue to suffer grief and sorrow emotionally, then dying, never knowing that it was a choice. We like to describe hell on earth, but do we believe in a heaven on earth? Well, we'll not have peace, tranquility, patience, and compassion, or understanding that's necessary for peace. We won't be able to have that. We can think about it, but we won't be able to express it. Peace is defined as a rule of order in a place of chaos. Peace is a negotiation between two antagonistic forces. Freedom from quarrels, an undisturbed state of mind, an absence of mental conflict. It is freedom and serenity. Well, peace in itself is something that we must be searching for, this kind of feeling that I just described. How many people have this? What does it take to have it? What we're discussing is forgiveness. Forgiveness is the key to have this. Well, let's break down what peace really means. Let's define and bring to life these words that define the word peace. Peace is the prize, the reward that is received by activating forgiveness and grace, mercy and love. Absorb for one moment the definition of peace: a rule of order in a place of chaos. Where's that place of chaos? The place of chaos is the world we live in. Not so much from the weather or the vegetation, the buildings, the stuff man's created, but from the words and actions of relationships, what we do and how we act towards one another. how we use the words that we speak with one another, how we describe our wants and our desires, our frustrations, our pain and sorrow, loss, death. The rule of order in all this chaos is Jesus Christ. He is peace. He is grace. He is love. He is mercy. He is salvation. He is purpose, because without him, without his words, we will live in chaos. Without his instruction and his testimony, we will continue to treat one another with disrespect. He is peace. He is grace. He is love. He is mercy. He is salvation. He is purpose, because without him, without his words, we will all continue to live in chaos. Then the word peace has the word called negotiation. Negotiation is a strategic discussion that will resolve an issue in a way that both parties find acceptable. Therefore, one party will always come out on top of a negotiation. Jesus Christ is our Redeemer and our negotiation for peace. With him and in him, we will manifest peace. We will come out on top in all issues. Antagonistic, another definition of peace. Antagonistic forces, a negotiation between two antagonistic forces. An antagonistic force are actions that are purposely malicious and unkind. An antagonist is someone who actively opposes someone or something, usually very hostile and malicious. Force is a push or pull upon an object resulting from the object's interaction with another object. So an antagonistic force is a negative and positive energy of two separate realities. These realities are the negative force, that is Satan, evil, darkness, confusion, anger, greed, whatever you want to call him. That's what he consists, those are the words he uses. The positive force reality is Jesus Christ, the words he is, a part of his love and mercy and grace and understanding and forgiveness, peace, tranquility, kindness. In this case, biblically, the two forces at opposition are the positive force of God Almighty and the negative force of Satan. So Jesus Christ is the agreement between those two antagonistic forces. So mercy, grace, love and forgiveness and compassion is Jesus Christ. These are the agreements made into a force of positive energy that creates a power that changes the way the human race treats one another. Let's summarize peace. A negotiation between two antagonistic forces vying for our minds and our souls. One is full of unforgiveness and calamity, bitterness and hate, impatience, anger, greed, and death. This ugly, destructive, negative force has capability and influence to distort truth, peace, patience, and wholeness. It has an imagination and mind unlike ours because it is not trapped in a body. Therefore, it has the power to be everywhere, but needs a body to host its powerful force of negativity, somewhere to put its information into, somewhere that it can drive, to jump into a human being's mind and create all this chaos so that this entity, this energy, can drive that human being into craziness. It is a spirit and it's invisible. It has the power to persuade even the most positive humans. It is information and distorted words used to distract us from the peace that transcends understanding. He plants the negative word into our minds and then uses force to get us to activate them and act them out with one another. It's a simple truth. Love is the positive force that exposes those lies and distortions of truth. Love is mercy and patience and understanding. It's full of kindness and compassion, forgiveness. We forgive because he forgave us. We forgive because it's the force that redeems us from the negative power of the negative force that wants to absorb our eternal spirit and separate you and I from our inheritance. He plants the positive words into our minds, Christ, through his words, then gives us the power to activate them and change the world around us with encouragement, mercy, kindness, full of healing and peace of body and mind and spirit. Everything we are discussing is based on relationships. The human being is relational, and Satan understands this. The demon is constantly destroying these relationships to separate us from the love that he detests with all his power. Christ came to reconnect us to the love of his Father, to be the sons and daughters of the Most High. Through understanding and compassion, kindness and patience, mercy, grace, and forgiveness, we can accomplish this. He has given us the tools to build powerful relationships. We can heal one another from anger, mental illness, self-loathing, insecurities, and so on. So in Matthew 5:23-24, Christ says this, so if when you are offering your gift at the altar, and while you are there, you remember that your brother or sister that has any grievance against you, leave your gift at the altar and go first make peace with your brother or sister. Then come back and present your gift. We must not let the sun set with bitterness and anger, resentment and confusion. We must make sure we go out of our way to let go of the anguish that we cause and also the transgressions caused against us. Make peace at all odds. In Corinthians 2:13, 4-6, it says, if anyone has caused pain and grief, he has not so much grieved me as he has grieved and distressed all of you to some extent. Not to put it too severely, the punishment inflicted on him by the majority is sufficient. Now, instead of further rebuke, now you should rather turn and graciously forgive and comfort, encourage your brother, your sister, to keep him from being overwhelmed by excessive sorrow and despair. I mean, to have pity on someone who's making some horrendous mistakes, to know that that despair and grief is going to come out in their personality sooner or later. It is the life of Jesus we witnessed. Love, mercy, forgiveness, tenderness, grace and patience and understanding to all the oppressed by the evil one. As he was fastened to the cross like an object, defiled and humiliated, shown no mercy, no grace, or love, that we witnessed his greatest single act of forgiveness. Before he took his last breath, he said to his Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. It was through his death and resurrection that we now have the power, the understanding, the mercy, the grace and love to love like he loved, to forgive like he forgave, to have mercy on one another as he had mercy on us, to receive his grace so that we can be a divine and special gift in one another as he was and is for us. Forgiveness is the key to peace of mind.